Hello and welcome to DEI Today, a podcast where we discuss topics related to diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. Our goal is to create a pathway of equality and belonging for Black, Indigenous, and people of color. I'm your host, Dr. K. Edwin Bryant, and on today's show, I'm very excited to have with us Gadsby Brown. Gadsby Brown has an unparalleled passion for the nonprofit industry. Her work and impact are testaments of her strong belief in the necessity of outstanding boards and good philanthropic practices. Her firm, the Gadsby Group, has helped hundreds of nonprofit organizations acquire billions of dollars. She's on the faculty of the fundraising school at Lilly Family School of Philanthropy and serves on board of trustees at Bethel University. Gadsby is an author of several books and a well sought after speaker. Gadsby is also the architect of so many nonprofit organizations of training and developing and teaching their teams and their executives what philanthropy really means in the world that we live in. Gadsby, thank you so much for being here. I'm so glad that you're on our show.
Wow, it's such a pleasure. I need to take you everywhere with me to introduce. That was quite an introduction, and I liked everything you said.
What is the overall perspective on diversity, equity, and inclusion in the nonprofit sector? You deal with a lot of boards. In fact, I have your most recent book on my bookshelf. You deal with a lot of boards, leaders, executives, and I'm certain you see whether those organizations are diverse. In some ways, do they practice equity? Is equality something that you see that's scaling or trending, or something that you even see as possible? What's kind of your viewpoint? What's the footprint right now? The real deal conversation about diversity, equity, inclusion in the context of nonprofit spaces. What have you seen?
The real deal is that I've
Yes.
seen the good, the bad, and the ugly.
Oh,
And thank goodness there is the good that we can point to. There are some nonprofits who get it, who understand diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. And it starts at the board level. If it doesn't start at the top, it really does not trickle down to the rest of the organization. I don't believe that there can be any of that at the staff level without the board being that. So let me just digress a little bit and see where I am and kind of explore my thoughts on diversity. Uh,
yeah.
Diversity in too many instances that I've seen that are the bad and the ugly is just a matter of checking off boxes. Now
Mm,
it's a start, but it is
yeah.
sometimes it is a check off of a box, and that
Okay.
does not get deeply into the running of the organization. Then I've seen inclusion. And for some nonprofit organizations, that has been interpreted as we are welcoming you to our table. And when you're welcoming someone to your table after you've eaten, and then you say, okay, you can have a little tea now that I've finished the
Oh,
main meal, that is why some of the nonprofits are asking, well, we hire folks, but they don't stay. And this is one of the reasons why they don't stay because of that attitude. We are welcoming you to our table instead of the equity centered, which I'll move to. Equity, equity centered, meaning that you are a part of the organization. You are valued for what you're bringing to the table.
mm,
For example, too, with inclusion, I've drawn an organizational chart of what that looks like. And in inclusion, you have a few administrative assistants, maybe a manager down the line, but it is not in a true decision making position. But in
wow.
equity centered, which I call equity centered courageous leadership, you have
Wow.
people who are on the executive committee of the board, that the board is equally balanced with people of color, African Americans in particular, because that's my lived experience and I believe the most marginalized population. And so, with that, there needs to be some course correction. And that course correction begins with awareness. It leads to relationships because without relationships, you don't see the real value. And then with commitment, because I've had a couple of nonprofit people ask, well, we want diverse people on our board, but we don't want to put them on there because they're Black. Well, you wouldn't be putting them on the board just because they're Black. So it begs the question, Are you asking for super qualified Black board members while you are
Mm.
accepting mediocre white board members, or vice versa?
Oh, that's powerful. Now, this is what this show is all about. Thank you for being candid and being forthright, because it helps the listener, it helps our audience really understand kind of where things are. And I think what you raise is great in that that equity centered focus, that courageous leadership. That's what it takes. That courageous leadership to be able to point out when the box is being checked, to be able to identify and point out when others do not have the same type of requirements as non-whites in those environments, and the overall strategic priorities of the organization. If the executive level team, the board of directors, if they do not have diversity, equity, and inclusion as a priority, then you're exactly right. It won't filter down through HR. It won't impact any employee resource groups, staff, and the way they gather and how they interact will be impacted by it as well. And a lot of people think that when you walk through the door of a corporation or a nonprofit organization, that they divulge themselves of what's happening in the world. No, they bring those things into the workplace with them. And if we don't have the primary, or at least better, the empathy to deal with these matters, it can disrupt not only just a nonprofit, but it can disrupt any organization. And I think you're right. There must be courageous leadership to make that happen.